Welcome to Certificate Course in Dialogue Studies, Week 9, Session 2. We have with us today Dr. Syed Tahseen Raza, and he would be speaking on dialogue, democracy, and conflict resolution. Some reflections. Dr. Syed Tahseen Raza is an assistant professor in the Department of Strategic and Security Studies, Faculty of International Studies, Aligarh Muslim University, Aligarh. Previously, he taught at the Department of Political Science, Miranda House, University of Delhi, the Department of Political Science and Center for Women's Studies, AMU, Aligarh. An expert in international politics and security, he currently focuses on gender, peace, and security, and has an interest in establishing and popularizing security and peace studies programs in India. His most recent work, The United States and Pakistan in the 21st Century, Geostrategy and Geopolitics in South Asia, Routledge 2021, has been quite well received in academic circles. We welcome you, Dr. Raza. We would like to share with you that you have 2 hours for the entire session, and you can break it up into maybe 50% or so for your lecture and about 50% for the question, answers, and comments. And I would also like to share with the participants that they should have their camera on at all times. And I hope you all have read the mandatory reading that I sent you by email. And we hope that you can ask and have questions and comments on the said topic. You can take over, Dr. Raza, and we look forward to your session. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope I'm audible well. My voice is clear to you all? Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. The very outset, let me put on record, I'm thankful to Mr. Behzad, who has been kind enough to ask me to come in for this session, and particularly for the wonderful work which In Dialogue Foundation is doing, because at the time when dialogue seems not to capture the imagination of the world, you people are actually popularizing this as a important mechanism, as an important tool for the intervention in the problematic things which are happening in the world. And on all fronts, things are actually seeing a downward spiral, but there's still there are people who are trying to revive and revitalize the dialogic spirit in order to bring a betterment in the existing state of affairs. So kudos to the effort of In Dialogue Foundation, Behzad, and also Pragya for introducing me to this program. So as has already been communicated to you, what I intend to do within this span of 35, 40, 45, 50 minutes, I'll delve on the topic which I have communicated to you earlier. And then after that, I will take up questions, and we will have sort of a discussion rather, not question answer session, rather a discussion session. So the thing which I want to bring in this session is the effectiveness of dialogue for conflict resolution. And initially, I plan to have the aspect of democracy too, democracy, dialogue, and conflict resolution. But when I cursorily looked at the videos which has been uploaded by In Dialogue Foundation, then I saw that other lectures have especially been done on dialogue and democracy. So I will just be very cursorily touching the democratic aspect, how dialogue sustains, promotes, and highlights the democratic process. But rather, I'll emphasize more on the conflict resolution, the conflict management aspect, and that will be my main emphasis. And as this is the last aspect of the last topic of your syllabus, which has been given to us by Mr. Behzad. So conflict resolution also, there is a special mentioning of specific case studies. So I will not per se go into the specific case studies, but cursorily I will deal with the with some of the case studies and a dialogic approach which has been devised by a very important recent, you can say, the current thinker of dialogue studies, the idea of sustained dialogue mechanism, how to actually cull the benefit of dialogue from the various theoretical expositions which it has been provided by the different scholars. So how to make use of those theoretical positions or theoretical explanations of dialogue by different scholars in terms of its practical and the real utilization in terms of the resolution of the conflict. And that will be seen through this mechanism of sustained dialogue initiative, which actually began as the Dartmouth initiative, which began earlier, but the last session of that was held in 2015 in United States of America. So before I actually go in for directly dealing with conflict resolution, dialogue, and cursorily democracy, let us first try to understand, of course, in a very dialogic manner, what and why is it important for us to see dialogue as a mechanism which can be of use in the mitigation and the resolution of the conflict. So before directly going into that, let us first try to understand the pressing issues which the world currently confronts, which actually is currently prevailing in the world. So, as the module of the session allows me, and this is how I conduct our classes too. May I ask any one of you, to come up with your view? What actually you think is the main or the most pressing issue the world currently is facing? What, according to you, are the pressing issues that the world is confronted with? So, my plan is to first take your views, and then we will finalize the current problematic issues, and then we will see, is there any mechanism to solve these issues? Can we do something so as to bring an end to these pressing problematic issues? If yes, then what are those mechanisms? And if and how dialogue could play an important role in the mitigation of those conflicts that way. So this is my original plan, and in between I'll be dealing with the various theoretical positions of different scholars pertaining to conflict resolution, and particularly with the theoretical understanding of dialogue. So before I formally move on to that, can anyone of you help me in seeing what, according to you, are the most pressing issues which the world confronts? I hope the question is clear to you all. So one by one.
For me, it is rise of right-wing political parties.
So rise of right-wing political parties. So let me write it to rise of right-wing. Okay. Yes. Anyone else? Since we are in a dialogic conversation, we are trying to understand the importance of dialogue. So I think you must contribute your part. Pragya, I can proceed in this manner, I think, because last time also
yes,
I conducted.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so others, just the thing which you think
others two candidates have messaged itself.
Message is here. Okay, so it's okay. Yes.
Mona Lisa, some couple of people have said climate change.
Okay. Shara Abdullah, judging without knowledge. Okay, this is a pressing issue of the world. Okay. Climate change. So we have 2 upvote for climate change. And who else? Yeah, you can write it here too. Reuben, yes, terrorism. Of course, terrorism is definitely one of the most pressing issue which we are facing currently the world over. Okay, who else?
For me, it could be like the most of the topics others said. So one of the could be injustice in environmental distribution and the misuse.
Okay, so for Akansha, it's problems pertaining to environmental problems and what?
Injustice in environmental distributions.
injustice in environmental distributions. Okay, then we will cull all these issues and see how the other people of the world or a generalized understanding of the world hierarchize these issues in different terms. Okay, so who else? There are still some of us who have not come up with, or for you, the world is working very wonderfully, in a very wonderfully nice manner. Everything is all fine and nice, and nothing problematic is happening in the world according to you. Is it so? You can also say this, that there is no problem in the world and everything is going in a very fine manner.
I want you to say something. I want to add something like geopolitics.
No, Arafat, your time is over. You have put your point, so that's okay. Let's have others' point. Yeah. Unless and until we are able to understand the importance of dialogue in this manner, we won't be able to push in the importance of dialogue. Yes, Ruben, Reshmi, are you here? Lisa? Okay, so I should not test your patience and I should not keep asking this.
Reshmi has written fascism.
Yes.
In the comments.
Fascism, okay. Okay, so let's devise a mechanism, because you all are not coming up with your own views. I initially planned to have your views and then make a list of that. But since you all are reluctant coming up with your own views, so what I will do is, let us agree to the listing of the pressing problems of the world by some international organizations whom we all at least recognize, if not accept, or if we not give a lot of importance to. So let's agree to the listing which has been done by certain international organizations. I hope on this you all will agree. Is it okay? So let's come to the listing of this such sort of pressing problems by different agencies of the world. There is one agency by the name United Nations Foundation. So when the name United Nations come, then some sort of legitimacy is attached to it. So not necessarily all the issues, but 5 important issues which is prevalent in the world and which has been identified this United Nations Foundation to emphasize upon or to look for in 2022. And in that 5 issues, some of the issues which has been discussed by you, which has been highlighted and pointed out by you, that those are already there. So I will try to discuss those pressing issues, and then we'll see if we may in any way be able to overcome or rein in those problematic things which is happening all over the world. And the interconnected nature of the things which is happening is obvious to you all. I hope most of you have done your graduation, and so you will be able to understand the interlinkages between the things. So suppose, for example, climate change is happening. So, and the effect of that climate change actually is going to be witnessed, is going to be felt by all. Whether we are living in the United States of America, or you are living in Delhi, or Arafat is living in Kashmir somewhere, or JNU, or some of us are in Central Asia. So the effect of all these things are felt by everyone. This is clear to you all. So what I'm going to do now is to discuss very quickly the 5 important, critically important issues which has been identified by United Nations Foundations as the issues to watch in 2022. So in that hierarchy, the number one issue goes to response to COVID-19 recovery. So how the world has responded to COVID-19 and how the world will respond to recovering the problematic aspects which has happened as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. That is a very important issue. That is a very pressing problem which the world confronts with. Because it's still, maybe in India, we have overcome this phase of the problematic phase of that pandemic. But it's still, the recovery has not been done. And in terms of vaccine distribution, still there is a lot of inequality all over the world. So the number one issue which United Nations Foundation prescribes or understand, and this was done on the basis of voting by the United Nations Foundation. Okay, so this was documented as a result of a lot of study. So the number one issue is response to COVID-19 pandemic. And the second one, which is underlined by United Nations Foundation, is that relates to poverty reduction. So poverty reduction, or the issue related to inequality, that has always been there. But as a result of the problematic aspect of COVID-19 pandemic, this has actually aggravated the problem of poverty. So according to one estimate by United Nations Foundation, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, it is estimated that between 100 million to 150 million people were pushed back into extreme poverty in 2021. So this is the additional problem which has been caused by COVID pandemic. Similarly, the third thing, and that I will emphasize more because many of you, at least out of 5 or 6 people, 3 or 4 of you have highlighted this, and that is the issue related to climate change. So the third issue is climate change issue. And in that, we are, all of us understand and know this, that we are on the verge of a great catastrophe because of the climate change which is happening, and we are not able to actually do the things which ideally needs to be done, or at least we are just coming up with pledges, we are just coming up with ideas, and we are just coming up with different deadlines, but we are not able to follow and strictly accept and follow those deadlines. So and ideally, in the mitigation of climate change issue, the active involvement of all is required. And we have seen that there have been very ambitious programs which have been set by different international bodies and deadlines that has been marked, but we are woefully behind, and insufficient response has been done as a result of the coming together of different people. Recently, we are actually having a COP27, Conference of Parties by United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Control, that's going on now in Sharm el-Sheikh. And in that conference, Sharm el-Sheikh conference, it has been highlighted that 3 times, just have this statistics, 3 times more people are displaced by climate disaster than war. It has been highlighted by COP27 recently. So 3 times more people are displaced by climate disaster than war. So we may think war to be of something which has put the world in a very problematic situation, but it is not actually war which is that problematic. It is actually the climate change which is more problematic, because according to statistics, 3 times more people are affected by climate change than by war. And the chief of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, has highlighted that almost half of the humanity is in a danger zone because of this problematics of climate change issue. And there was a report which was released before this Conference of Parties 27, which is happening in Sharm el-Sheikh. And in that report, it was amply highlighted that developing countries would need around $1 trillion by the end of this decade in external financing for climate action program. So if at all we have to meet the deadlines, we have to do something substantially to avoid ourselves from the catastrophic as the effect of climate change. We need, or the developing countries need, in external support around $1 trillion. $1 trillion is required. And from where all these things come, here comes the importance of a dialogic mechanism, which will enable us to forge a mechanism through which we can tide over these things. But before we go into highlight the importance of dialogue, let's have some more important things pertaining to climate change. So in the same league, in the recent Sharm el-Sheikh conference, United Nations chief tweeted, and I'm just verbatim quoting him, "We are on a highway to climate hell with our foot on the accelerator." And you all know what accelerator is. When you put your foot on accelerator, your bike or your vehicles move very fastly. So the chief of the United Nations says, we are on a highway to hell with our foot on the accelerator. Our planet is fast approaching the tipping points that will make climate chaos irreversible. So the thing which is going to happen is we may not be able to irreverse the thing. There are certain irreversible changes which is going to happen as a result of our growing recklessness. And therefore, it is the warning by the chief of the United Nations to all of us, and not just the head of the different institutions or the different governments. And he warns us all that we need urgent climate action. And what that urgent climate action will be, that will be the support in terms to the tune of around 1 trillion as a support to the developing countries. So these are actually some of the problems. And this is just the third aspect of the third issue, which has been which has been documented by United Nations Foundation. So they have identified 5 problems. There are more problems too, but we will suffice with documenting only those 5 of the important problems which has been highlighted by them. So after climate change, and we highlighted climate change more because you also agreed that climate change is definitely an important issue which we must, which the world currently confronts. Then another very important issue pertains to gender equality and the rights of girls and women. So the statistics, I need not explain to you the various statistics which is highlighted from time to time by UN agencies, UN Women and other organizations. And particularly as a result of the COVID pandemic, the problem faced by women and girls has actually aggravated many times more. So there is disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on women and girls. And it seems that there are pervasive and systematic challenges, systematic problems that prevent progress on closing the gender rights and opportunity gap. So the headway which we had made earlier, we were not able to actually capitalize because of the things which happened in the world. And recently also in 2021, 2 important, there is one Generation Equality Forum. That Generation Equality Forum is held from time to time, and it was held in Mexico and Paris in 2021. And it has mobilized many pledges and commitments, but those commitments also has not yet been realized, and there needs concerted effort. There needs an effort to put concerted effort so that we may be able to come together in order to bridge the gap and do things constructively so that the gender inequality which exists, that lessens, and we may do things so that gender parity, we will be able to achieve some sort of gender parity. Then finally, the 5th important issue which United Nations Foundation has documented is the issue of growing humanitarian crisis and conflict. So when I was asking you about the pressing issue which the world is facing, I expected that at least one of you will say that the recent Russia-Ukraine war is a very problematic issue which the world is confronted with. But I think maybe, but yes, I can see at least one candidate is from the international relations background, Arafat, but he also didn't highlight this Russia-Ukraine war.
In that case, I'm sorry to interrupt. In that case, our foreign minister Jaishankar says that Europe thinks that Europe's problem is world's problem, and our problem is not the world's problem. So that.
Yeah, a very good point, Mr. Arafat, and the academic racism, what we call that, actually is very much present. But yes, we also didn't talk about our problem. We only talked about the problem of theirs only, and not our problem in that sense. We should have talked about our issue pertaining to China or Pakistan, but that also were not highlighted by any one of you. So yes, you're right. There is this academic hierarchy happening, academic racism in a sense, have prevalent in the academia too. So we may, if we get time, we will talk about that too in terms of nuclear parity. If I get time, just remind me, we'll discuss that too. So yes, there is growing humanitarian crisis and conflict. So world is facing unprecedented level of humanitarian need. And humanitarian need in terms of the support which people require. So in 2022, according to one statistics, again by United Nations Foundation, and the reason that I zeroed in on United Nations Foundation is because of the fact that it accrues a sort of a legitimacy, because had I taken in of the listing by some other organization, it would be debated. So this may also be debated, but comparatively, it doesn't leave much scope for discussion, because it includes most of the things. So growing humanitarian crisis and conflict is also another very important and critical issue which the world confronts, which the world is facing today. And there is an unprecedented level of humanitarian need. According to one statistics, in 2022, 274 million people are expected to need humanitarian aid, which is an almost 20% increase from an already record high number in 2021. So from 2021 to 2022, there is a record 20% increase in the number of people who needs humanitarian assistance. And apart from these, there exist a number of other troubling trends which we may categorize under this broader category of growing humanitarian crisis. And that is, we all know there is growing increase in forced displacement all over the world. There are more people on the edge of acute famine. At a time when we are living in 21st century, all sorts of high-yielding variety of crops and other things, but still there are people and there are territories which are facing acute famine crisis. And then there are growing income inequality, which we already have talked about. Then there are increased intersection between issues like climate and hunger with conflict. So all these actually combine together in order to make the problems much more intense, much more problematic, and creating an environment and a situation in which it seems that there is no way out. There is nothing which can be done in order to mitigate the problem. And apart from this, there is, of course, as has been pointed out by someone of you, there is this rise of authoritarianism all over the world, not just in our part of the planet, our part of the world, but all over the world, from Latin America to South Asia, to almost all the countries of the world, in some sense, is seeing rise of authoritarianism. And then there is, of course, growing surge in conflict and violence everywhere. So these are actually a microcosm of the problematic things which we see when we have a look of the world. When we try to cursorily analyze the events and happenings of the world, we come across these depressing things, which leads us to a sort of severe depression, you can say, to the extent that it might seem, how could it be that the developed world, which has always been and which throughout history has been responsible for the problems which has happened all over the world, particularly in the third world country. So how could it be? They may be mobilized to support the developing countries with $1 trillion support in order to mitigate the climate change. Could it be possible? As the historical trends showcase, it may not be possible. It doesn't seem to be a possibility. Similarly, on other fronts too, it apparently seems that there may be the continuance of the similar process and similar happenings, but there might not be something better which might come in future years. And just in order to explain things further, let us very quickly look at some of the areas in which the world is spending its money. So the world expenditure, when we are confronted with so much of problem, where actually our efforts are directed at. I teach courses on defense and security. So I will again take the example of certain statistics, which will enable us to understand where our focus is. So there is one international organization, SIPRI, the Stockholm Institute of Peace Research. And Stockholm Institute of Peace Research conducts regular surveys related to military spending, military expenditure of different countries of the world. So let's very quickly have a cursory look at the military expenditure report of World SIPRI, Stockholm Institute of Peace Research, Annual Military Expenditure Report 2021. So in 2000, just three statistics I will present here, and then I will bring the important aspect of conflict resolution mechanism through dialogue, which might help us in mitigating some of these problems. So in 2021, SIPRI reports that the world military expenditure surpassed the $2 trillion mark for the first time, reaching $2113 billion. So this actually is the focus of the world nowadays, when we are confronted with those pressing problems related to which the chief of United Nations is saying that we have actually put our foot on the accelerator towards a highway to hell. At such a time, where our concentration is spending more and more on military or securing ourselves from the point of view of defense. So, and then the global spending in 2021 was 0.7% higher than in 2020 and 12% higher than 2012. So there is an upward trend in the military spending every year. Despite the fact that in 2020, 2021, we witnessed a very problematic thing in the world in the form of COVID pandemic that would ideally have accrued all our attention towards spending money, towards healthcare, toward medical support. But even during such a time, what we did was we were actually worldwide, and it's not just the status of a particular country, it's the worldwide expenditure. So we spent 0.7% more in 2021 as compared to the spending in 2020. And the onward march in terms of military expenditure all over the world continued from 2021, and that was 12% more from 2012. And the third important aspect related to this is the economic effect of COVID-19 pandemic have not ended the continuous upward trend in world military expenditure, which was seen since 2015. And then the military spending as a share of government expenditure, that also shows that where the focus of different countries of the world is. So this statistics tells us about the average military spending of different countries of the world. So the average military spending as a share of government expenditure in 2021 remained the same as in 2020, that was at 5.9%. So despite the fact that we were undergoing through a heartbreaking, heart-wrenching, unique in many sense problem in the form of the global pandemic, but still we didn't lessen our spending. The world average spending on military couldn't lessen, and that actually continued, and that remained at 5.9%. So these are some of the facts, and in this frame, we aspire to build a society, we aspire to build a world which is comparatively better from the problematic things we have just now witnessed, or we are witnessing for the last so many years. So is it that can we think of something, or can we think of some mechanism or some tools or some ways through which these problems which we just now saw, and this actually is affecting all of us, this is actually affecting the whole of humanity, can we think of something which we may take recourse in, which we may work upon, which we may think, which we may utilize in order to rein in this problem? And if we try to look at the available recourse which we have, one thing which generally has happened all through history is the developed part of the world, or all those countries who are powerful, they have actually played short. And whatever they have decided, that was accepted by other countries of the world and other people of the world. So one way of trying to mitigate this problem is to devise a mechanism or support a mechanism in which there will be a decision. That decision will be by those who are at the helm of affair. They will decide the things, and those things will be implemented at every level. This has actually been the way of the world, but throughout history, we see that this has not resulted in any sort of positive outcome. And the makeup of the world, which we a glimpse of that which we saw just now, that is this because of the fact that somehow we were not able to utilize other aspects which were available to us, which could have played its part in mitigating the conflict in some other ways. And here comes the idea of dialogue. So dialogue is a mechanism through which we may end up, or we may build up an environment, we may build up a situation, we may build up a mechanism through which the concerted effort will be put in such a manner that the problems which are witnessed at the world level, and the manifestation of which and the effect of which is seen by all, that could actually be understood by each and every one of us. And when we are able to understand, when each and every one of us are able to understand that the problem is going to be faced by everyone, no one can remain immune to the problems which the world is confronting right now. So for example, if climate change is happening, it's not just that those countries who are which are located at the boundary, or which are located which are located at the seaside, or those countries which are in the tropics, which are located in the tropics, they do not get affected. So once this problem will happen, that will affect everyone, and we all know that how this is going to affect everyone. So this mechanism of dialogue actually is a process through which we may end up in the long run in building a process which will enable us to look at this problem as if these problems are not someone else, but these problems are ours too. And this is not just a very wishful thinking, which, since I have to deliver a lecture on dialogue, and therefore we have to discuss these things, and therefore I'm talking in high decibel mode in order to encourage you to think in positive terms in terms of dialogue. Actually, historically, there has been instances, there has been evidence, there has been report which highlights that through the mechanism of dialogue, certain problematic things have come to an end. I know that many of the skeptics, and many of those who are critical of this dialogic mechanism, they will say that take the name of any problem and take the name of dialogue. Has it that those problem has been solved? No. So what about the Israel-Palestine problem? We have a lot of dialogue between the leaders of Israel and Palestine. We had a lot of dialogue between the different groups. For example, in relation to India and Pakistan too, there has been a lot of discussion, there has been a lot of dialogue, there has been a lot of negotiations, but still we are back to square one. We may also take closer home with the example as Arafat has said that we should not concern ourselves with the problem of the world or the Western problem. We should look inward to our problem. So the Chinese incursion to our country. We have always presented an olive branch to China, but the manner in which we have been, the process have been carried out by China, it's all open to us. And we cannot, I don't need to highlight, and I don't need to recount the things every one of you know. Every one of you, those who are not from international relations background too, being aware of the daily news, you know what actually is happening. So this high decibel talk regarding the positivities of dialogue might seem to be something which I am just pushing in order to make my point of discussion pertaining to dialogue as a thing which should be in the current times in order to mitigate the problems of the world. So let us see one by one how the different scholars have tried to see dialogue and what the mechanism of dialogue has actually done. So what now I will do is I will try to discuss very briefly both dialogue as an idea and dialogue as a form of an academic understanding. In other words, the theoretical understanding of dialogue and how the different scholars have tried to see dialogue and what the contribution of dialogue as a mechanism has been. So for those of us who think that dialogue is simply a time-buying tactics. So if you will talk to someone, if there is some discussion you are indulging in, if you want to solve some problem, then generally it so happens and we say this in terms of the politics of dialogue, that if you don't have to resolve any issue, what you do is you put that process through the dialogue mechanism. So for example, there is some problem happening between this. This generally happens now because when we have shifted to the physical mode from the online mode in teaching, when we decide the date of sessional or some other thing. So either teacher has to decide the date, or if we call for democratic decision, then whenever we call for democratic decision, then a final date is not decided. So there will be some problem with some of the student in a particular day. On that particular day, other student will come up with some other problem. So what happens, in order to not resolve the conflict, just in order to linger on the decision of the date, we decide for a dialogue between all of us. So the more parties come to the decision of the things, the problem gets not solved, rather the problem gets elongated. So generally in the policy making circle, it is said that if you don't have to solve anything, what you do is you put that process through dialogue mechanism. So is it really the thing? Is it really so? Or is it that we are somehow wrong in understanding the real thing which dialogue aspires for? Or what actually dialogue is? We are not able to understand the in actuality what the dialogue is. So maybe we are confusing dialogue with negotiation. Maybe we are confusing dialogue with discussion. Maybe we are confusing dialogue with debate or other things. So dialogue is a different thing. Debate is a different thing. Discussion is a different thing. And negotiation is a different thing. So maybe if someone says that Israel-Palestine issue is still lingering on, despite the fact that there was a dialogic mechanism to solve that. But it was not really tried from the point of view of real dialogic perspective. It was not a real dialogue in the real sense of the term. It was basically negotiation. So what is the difference between negotiation and dialogue? What is the difference between dialogue and discussion, dialogue and debate? All these things I will just now discuss those in details. So let's now very quickly come to the theoretical aspect of dialogue. And then after acquainting ourselves with the theoretical aspect of dialogue, what I'll do is I will try to see a mechanism of sustained dialogue, the reading of which I sent you all, and I hope some of you at least have gone through that reading, because generally in my classes here in my university, whatever the readings which we send, generally students don't go through. But I hope you are comparatively more sincere, and by the faces of yours, teachers also somehow learn to understand from your faces a lot many things. While we were a student, we used to think that sometimes when we used to say something, generally the first classes I used to skip. And I used to skip because I was not able to get up early. And then you come up with excuses to your teacher. So, and whenever we made excuses, I made excuses. My teacher always told me that, yeah, this is not the right thing which you are saying. So from my face anyhow, he could understand that I am telling a lie. So, but from your faces, I could see that some of you at least have gone through the readings. So I will not also emphasize much on the reading. I will just have a cursory understanding from that reading, and I will highlight much on the theoretical aspect of dialogue. So till this point, I hope things are clear to you. If there is anything you want to ask any one of you, if there is any a problem or anything which you have not been able to understand what I am going to do, I hope till this point things are okay. Is the class with me?
So obviously.
So only one, obviously. What about others?
No,
okay,
sir.
Just gesture. If you don't want to say, just put a give some job. Yeah, okay, good. Okay. So Irfan, Afnan, Muhammad, Mr. Muhammad, you are smiling, but you are not gesturing that, yeah, you are able to understand the thing. James, okay, good. And then Shara Abdullah, Kulsum, Liza, Raven, they actually are not, we don't see. Okay, so we are moving now to understand the theoretical aspect of dialogue. Okay. And understanding the theoretical aspect is sometimes not very, doesn't go well generally with the students. But since most of you are having, I think, at least all of you have done your graduation. Akansha, you all are at the level of masters and higher up. Huh? Is it okay? Yes? Okay. So let us first begin with the definition of dialogue, which I will say there is a lot many definition of dialogue, but one definition of dialogue which is appealing to me, which I like. And not just I like, there are a lot many other people who like that definition of dialogue. Okay. So that definition of dialogue is by Hall Saunders. And Hall Saunders definition, actually, we utilize in that. I particularly use this particular definition of Hall Saunders because that we are utilizing in that paper which I have sent you. That is the Sustained Dialogue Initiative, the transformation experience of conflict resolution through sustained dialogue. In that too, we make use of this definition of dialogue. One thing, there are different scholars who define dialogue in different ways. But there is certain common denominator factor you all would have gone through in your high school classes. There are certain minimum common thing which is present in the definition of all of those scholars who have defined dialogue. Okay. So for Hall Saunders, dialogue is a process of genuine interaction through which human beings listen to each other deeply enough to be changed by what they learn. So there are certain things which are of critical importance in this definition of dialogue, and that is, there is genuine interaction. I hope you are able to understand what is genuine interaction, through which human beings listen to each other and just doesn't listen to each other, rather listen to each other deeply enough in the manner to be changed by what they learn. Okay, so each makes a serious effort to take others' concern into his or her own picture or understanding, even when disagreements persist. No participant or parties to the dialogue gives up her or his identity, but each recognizes enough of the other's valid human claims that he or she will act differently towards the other. So there are certain elements which are highlighted in this definition of dialogue. And in that definition of dialogue, what is highlighted is the fact that it is not just the presentation of your own views or exposition of your own ideas or deliberation upon what you think is right. Rather, it is actually about putting yourself in the shoes of the other to understand what the other's claim is. So in a sense, it is a sort of a learning as well as it is a sort of unlearning too. So unlearning in the sense that you are able to understand the position of the other parties which are involved in that dialogue. So this definition has been discussed in detail in the sustained dialogue model. I hope you would have gone through that. I am just repeating this because the importance of this will be highlighted when we will try to see the difference between dialogue and debate, for example, or dialogue and negotiation, for example, or dialogue and discussion, for example. So the importance of this definition will come to fore. So once again, very quickly, dialogue is a process of genuine interaction through which human beings listen to each other deeply enough to be changed by what they learn. Meaning by each party to the dialogue. Each party to the dialogue makes a concerted and serious effort to take others' concern into his or her own picture, even when disagreement persists. So if there are things on which we all agree, suppose, for example, initially I asked all of you to come up with certain issues which you think are the most problematic issues of the world. So you came up with certain ideas. So I too and others too either accepted or tolerated others' point of view. That as, okay, if someone is saying climate change, other is saying authoritarianism. So let's zero in on both the things, climate change or if at all we have to agree, we agree in between authoritarianism and climate change. Okay. So the real test is when there is disagreement. So suppose, for example, when we were discussing about the pressing issues of the world, someone of you, for example, Arfat has been more vocal. So Arfat talked about authoritarianism. And so, for example, Reshmi or, for example, James, you talked about some other issue and you were not able to agree on a particular point or a coalescing of both the things. So in that particular situation, the real test of the real spirit of dialogue, the real importance of dialogue would come to fore. And it is during that point of disagreement that you need to emphasize upon the real spirit of dialogue. So each party makes a serious effort to take others' concern into his or her own picture or standing, even when disagreements persist. And no participant gives up his or her own identity. So it's not that if you are undergoing a dialogic process, so one of you, for example, Arafat has to let go with his own idea of authoritarianism being the most important and the most pressing issue of the world. Or for example, James having to let go with his own ideas. So we don't have to let go with our own identity. No participant gives up his or her own identity, but each recognizes enough of the other's valid human claims that he or she will act differently towards the other. So maybe when we're discussing these things, maybe this question might crop up in someone of your mind, sir. Why is so much of effort we should take? What is the need for indulging in such sort of a dialogic process? Is at all it is required? Can't it be that those of us who are in majority, for example, so if 10 people are there, so if 9 people, if more than 50%, if 50 plus 1%, 51% of the people agree on a particular thing, then we will agree to that thing in a system of majoritarian decision making. So that will also be a good way. But here comes the importance of dialogue. The importance of dialogue lies in the fact that the result which we achieve as a dialogic process, that actually is long lasting. And the result which we achieve as a decision making process on the basis of majoritarian decision making, that majoritarian decision making might change after some period of time. So for example, now 50 plus 1% of people is for a particular issue to be the most important issue, considered to be the most important issue. But after a certain point of time, maybe that 50% will shift to some other side. But if we are deciding things on the basis of this definition of dialogue, as highlighted by Hall Saunders, then the decision which we will reach, that decision will be long lasting. That decision will be the decision which everyone will think that this is my decision. This is the decision of the class. This is the decision of everyone. And if the decision is reached on the basis of that dialogic process, that decision will be, or that end result will be durable, sustainable, and that decision will be the real decision or the real outcome in the long run. So this entire effort, this entire problem of undertaking a dialogic process. Okay. So I hope I have not confused you. I have actually tried to explain the things in a better manner. So the real spirit and the real idea behind a dialogic process is clear to you. I hope it's not confusing. If there is any confusion you want to ask, you may flag in quickly. Otherwise, I will explain it in a more better manner by comparing and contrasting dialogue with other processes. For example, negotiation, or for example, debate, or for example, discussion. And then I'll take the example of some of the, because then Behzad will tell me that we have just explained the thing and not have come up with the academic explanation of the thing. And being from the academia, maybe Behzad has especially asked me to come to explain things academically. So that also I will do. So if till now there is any problem, if there is anything which you are not able to grasp, so maybe from your faces, I think you're not able to grasp anything. Say yes or no. So I assume it is yes, okay? Because I have to complete a lot many other things too. So unless and until you say no, I assume that it is okay, it is going good. Okay. So now let's very quickly see, distinguish dialogue from other kind of conversation. May I request Pragya to, because I'm not able to keep track of the time. So please remind me when I am left with how much time I am left with.
So we have about 55 minutes for the session. 55 minutes for the session, and we have 55 minutes in the session. Am I not audible?
Within that time, I have to go in conduct discussion too. So in 10-15 minutes, I'll finalize, and then I'll have ample of time for discussion, because in such sort of a workshop, discussion is very important. So very quickly. So now what I'm going to do is I'm comparing and contrasting dialogue with other forms of things which generally we associate dialogue with, and then we say that dialogue has not done anything. And skeptics come up with the view that if we have to delay something, then we indulge in dialogic process. So now on, after going through this particular aspect of the lecture, it will be clear for you to distinguish between what we say as the failure of the dialogue is actually not the failure of the dialogue. It is actually the failure of something else and not the failure of the dialogue as such. Okay. So to compare dialogue with debate first, we differentiate dialogue with debate. So to distinguish dialogue from other sort of conversation, for example debate or conversation, let's first try to see distinguish dialogue from debate. So dialogue is different from debate in that it encourages diversity of thinking and opinion rather than suppressing these notions. In debate, what we do, maybe you all have participated in debate competitions in your schools. If not in school, if not you have participated, at least you have seen. Or maybe all of you are witness to the chaotic way in which the parliamentarians speak in the parliament, not just in our country, but other countries of the world, because those are now live, we can see. So in debate, what happens in debate? In debate, there is this attempt to rein in with your version of the thing. In debate, you want to win over your argument. So whatever your argument is, so for example, we initiated with the acceptance or documentation of the pressing issue of the world. So suppose, for example, someone of you said that climate issue should be considered to be the most pressing issue. So if it is a debate, then what will happen? You will discard others' claim. If other student will say, other candidate will say that, no, we should also have authoritarianism as one of the important issue. Then if we are conducting a debate, those who come up with the idea of putting climate change as the most pressing issue, that candidate or that applicant or that person will try to scuttle, will try to suppress, will try to stop the issue highlighted by the other person. Okay? But this is not the forte of dialogue. This is not dialogue. In dialogue, you actually appreciate or try to understand why the other person is coming up with his claim of authoritarianism. Maybe the other person is living in such a country where, as a result of authoritarianism, he is facing a lot of problems. Therefore, to him, it seems that authoritarianism is the most problematic things and not climate change. Okay? So dialogue is different from debate in that it encourages diversity of thinking and opinion rather than suppressing these notions. Okay? In the practice of dialogue, there is an agreement that one person's concepts or belief should not take precedence over those of the other. I hope it is clear. So in the practice of dialogue, what we do is there is an agreement that one person's or one candidate or one student's or one claimant's or one party's concepts or beliefs should not take precedence over those of the other. So in dialogue, the intention is not to advocate, but to inquire. I hope the difference between advocacy and inquiry is clear to you. So what we do in dialogue? In dialogue, the intention is not the advocacy, the intention is inquiry. Not to argue, but to explore. Not to convince, but to discover. It is not merely the use of the different words or the semantics which we say. It is actually in the real practice of both these aspects of dialogue and debate, these things come. So what dialogue actually tries to bring home in, it actually tries to inquire. It actually inhibits advocacy and promotes inquiry. It sustains the process or inculcates the process or highlights the process or promote the process of exploration. It sustains the process of discovery. And on the other hand, what debate does? Debate actually advocates thing. Debate actually argues for thing. Debate actually tries to convince by either means, by fair means or foul means. And you all are aware how the debate is conducted in the different parliaments of the world, or maybe in your schools and colleges. Okay, so this is the discussion. This is the difference between debate and dialogue. Okay, so Hall Saunders goes on to explain this in another very important way, and he says that debate assumes only one right answer and invest in pressing and defending it, whereas dialogue assumes the possibility of an answer better than any of the original points. So what actually all these leads to? Debate, finally, what it does is debate narrows the views and closes minds, whereas what dialogue does, dialogue actually can build new relationship. And it is the building of new relationship that actually is the beginning of the idea from where the beginning of conflict resolution or the end of the conflict or the end of the problem can happen. So unless and until we go to the root of the problem, we may not be able to solve the problem. So what dialogue does? Dialogue, with its inherent mechanism of exploration, discussion, exploration, understanding, empathy, what it does is it brings us to the root of the problem. And when once we reach to the root of the problem, then it will be easier for all the parties to reach to a particular conclusion. Okay, so dialogue ends up in building up and forging up new relationships. To buttress this claim, there is another important theorist of dialogue. He basically is and of course, the study of dialogue actually has been contributed by multidisciplinary approach. So you will find physicists, psychologists, neurologists, political scientists, international relations and security people like us too, who try to underline the importance of the dialogue. So this is David Bohm, and David Bohm is actually a physicist. So David Bohm makes a similar point about the difference between, in a similar sense, not between dialogue and debate, but dialogue and discussion. So what David Bohm says regarding the difference between dialogue and discussion: discussion is almost like a ping pong game. I hope many of you might be aware with the ping pong diplomacy. Anyone of you?
Yeah, Chinese ping pong diplomacy.
Chinese ping pong diplomacy. So again, we are falling prey to the Western design of understanding things from Western perspective. Arafat, we could have discussed ping pong in some other ways too. But anyways, it's good that you remember the Chinese and the United States relationship in terms of the ping pong diplomacy. Okay. So Reshmi, you are talking about, you have just, yeah, what about China, Gaza? Okay, yes. In what sense? Yeah, ping pong diplomacy was in relation to US and China relationship, opening up of United States with China. That is the ping pong diplomacy. So we are basically, I'm basically interested here now in understanding the difference between debate and discussion, which has been highlighted by David Bohm, who is a physicist. So discussion is almost like a ping pong game where people are batting the ideas back and forth. And the object of the game is to win or to get points for yourself. So what you do in a ping pong thing, or what you do, many badminton we are more used to in our part of the world. So we shuttle the cork from one side, then from the other side it comes. So what our intention is, what our purpose is to not let the shuttle, not let the cork drop on our side, but the cork to drop on the other side. Okay. So the purpose is to win the game, not to understand others' problem. Just anyhow and in any way, try to discuss in such a manner that our point gets prevailed. So the purpose is to win or to get points for yourself. Possibly, you will take up somebody else's ideas to back up your own. You may agree with some and disagree with others. But the basic point is what? but the basic point is to win the game. So maybe you will play mind game in a ping pong diplomacy in discussion. What you will do is, apparently you will take up the claim of someone else. So for example, I'm all the time taking name of Mr. Arafat because he's visible more here. So suppose, for example, he gave the example of authoritarianism as one of the important issue which needs to be prioritized in terms of the issue which the world currently confronts with, pressing issues of the world. Okay. So in order to buttress his point of authoritarianism, what he will do is, he will apparently, playing a mind game, try to take up the other issues, for example, the issue of climate change, and will say that yes, climate change is also an issue, but the issue of climate change is also highlighted and problematized further because of the fact that authoritarianism is at play. So if authoritarianism is not at play, then climate change will also not be an issue. So what actually he did was, he actually apparently tried to understand the issue which has been highlighted by others. But he ended up with the purpose of utilizing others' claim in order to win over with his own idea of putting his point to be the only or the major point as a major issue with the world confronts with. So what David Bohm says, that in discussion, possibly you will take up somebody else's ideas to back up your own ideas. You may agree with some and disagree with others, but the basic point is to win the game. So that's very frequently the case in discussion. In a dialogue, however, nobody is trying to win. Everybody wins if anybody wins. Okay.
But sir, with that kind of dialogue, I have a problem because if I will enter your house, and I will annex one room of your house and say, see, since I have occupied one room, there are 10 rooms in your house, I have occupied one. Let us have a dialogue. I am happy with one, you happy with 9. Conflict resolved.
Arafat, that is actually the spirit where we need to invoke. So in that sense, the lesser parties is invoking the idea of dialogue, but the party which is at the upper hand or the dominant party is not following dialogue in the true spirit. So that is actually not the problem with the concept of dialogue. That actually is the problem with, that is actually the problem with those who are practicing it. So the party which is dominant, that is not practicing dialogue. That is actually what it is doing. It is actually implementing things by its own force, by manipulating the idea of dialogue. I hope things are clear to you. So sorry for the interruption. Sorry for that.
Also, Raza, we have like less than 40 minutes left. So if you could just wrap up and take the questions as well.
Okay, yes. Sure. Just give me just 5-10 minutes. I'll wrap up and then I'll have a question. Arfat, I hope the thing is clear to you. Okay. So let's very quickly. That's very frequently the case in discussion. In a dialogue, what happens is nobody is trying to win. Rather, everybody wins if anybody wins. And there is a different sort of spirit to it. So an important aspect of dialogue is that all the parties which are involved, all those parties should accept the spirit of dialogue. So if one party is accepting following the spirit of dialogue and the other party is not following the spirit of dialogue, so that will not be a dialogue. That will end up being either debate or discussion or something else. Okay. So similarly, dialogue and mediation. So mediation is a formal process. So in mediation, for example, things which happen in Gaza, for example, or Indo-Pakistan conflict or some other conflict which is happening, or the things which is happening in, for example, between Israel, Ukraine and Russia. So there we find negotiation, and that is also not dialogue. That is the difference between negotiation and dialogue. So negotiation can end a conflict, but because it is not carried out in a dialogic spirit, that ending of the conflict may re-emerge. So we have seen many a times that Oslo Accord happened. As a result of the Oslo Accord, both the prime minister of both the countries, or the leader of Palestine and Israel, both of them got Nobel Prize, and we all the people of the world thought that the issue has come to an end, come to a close. But again, the problem didn't end because it was a negotiation. It was not actually finally done in the true spirit of the dialogue. That was imposition of the thing. Okay. So now let us summarize these things, all these things in terms of, again, Hall-Saunders ideas in 3 important points. The first one is the ways in which dialogue differs from formal mediation and negotiation. So the first point is, I will not explain, I will just very quickly go through this and not discuss in detail because I have to cover other issues too. So the hope for product for mediation or negotiation is a concrete agreement. The aim of dialogue is a changed relationship. It is obviously clear. There is no need to explain this, I hope. I just read it once again. The hoped for or the expectation for the product of mediation or negotiation is a concrete agreement. The aim of dialogue is a changed relationship. Similarly, the currency of negotiation is defining and satisfying the material interest through a specific jointly agreed arrangement. The outcome of dialogue, on the other hand, is to create new human and political capacities to solve the problem. Third one is negotiation require parties who are ready to try to reach the agreement. Dialogue can be fruitful by involving parties who are not yet ready for negotiation, but do not want a destructive relationship to continue. Similarly, negotiation deals with goods or rights that can be divided, shared, or defined in tangible ways. Dialogue may change relationship in ways that create new grounds for mutual respect and collaboration. So there is a cyclic process of dialogue, deliberation, and decision making. So in dialogue, what happens? It brings together many voices, different stories, different perspectives. It is a shared inquiry, exploration, and discovery. It is as a result of the deep listening, fostering respect and understanding. It is a result of shared meaning making and co-construction of knowledge. And it leads to deliberation. When such sort of an activity happens, that leads to deliberation. And what that deliberation is, in that deliberation, reasoned argument is met. The reasoned argument is discussed by all. Serious examination of possible solution is done. And then careful weighing of the trade-off is understood. And then that reason and informed judgment is explored and discussed. And that leads to the final result of the decision making. So this is how the discussion between debate and dialogue and other thing is. And now I just wanted to very quickly flag in the different scholars who have highlighted the importance of dialogue in different ways. So there is one important scholar, Martin Buber. Martin Buber saw dialogue. I have highlighted Hall-Saunders more because the reading which I sent you, in that the explanation of dialogue or theoretical exposition of dialogue as understood by Hall-Saunders, that has been utilized much. Therefore, I have explained him more. Now, just taking the example of some other scholars, for example, Martin Buber sees dialogue as the mode of interaction which makes any human life in any society worth living. So Martin Buber goes to the extent of making dialogue such a thing that it, according to him, is the mode of interaction which makes any human life in any society worth living. So if we are not utilizing the potential of dialogue, it means that we are anything but civilized human being. So if we are, as Arafat has asked the question of implementation of a particular idea. So if we are doing that we are actually not following the true spirit of dialogue, and therefore we are not worth living. We are not worth calling ourselves a human being. Okay. Then there are other scholars who say that, for example, David Bohm, which about whom we just now discussed, about he has described dialogue in terms of dialogue as essentially a process of shared thinking in the course of which a valuable form of relationship might emerge. And for Buber, dialogue is essentially a relationship, though it generally encompasses a cognitive grasp of others' point of view. Similarly, there are other scholars and practitioners, for example, Dalai Lama and others. So they actually, their conception of dialogue is more related to the essential unity of humankind. And they emphasize the idea that essentially human beings finally thinks in a manner which takes care of the interest of the other. If we try to understand things in essentialistic, humanistic manner. So they try to explain things in terms of essential humanity of things. So dialogue in other sense is also considered as meaningful interaction and exchange between people, often of different social, cultural, political, religious, or professional groups, who come together through various kinds of conversation or activities with a view to increased understanding. Then there are certain communication theorists. We talked about the...
Dr. Raza, sorry to interrupt you. We have only 30 minutes left. So if you could just
Okay, just in 1-2 minutes, let me... this is how...
Yes.
So just another communication theorist also supports the idea of dialogue, or they make their contribution towards the understanding of dialogue in a different, in an altogether new way. And in that, there is one scholar by the name Donald Cardbourg. Donald Cardbourg is sometimes called as Donald Cardbourg to French people term it this way. The Donald Cardbourg, his perspective of dialogue is unique. And he says that even in certain circumstances, silence can also be a part of a dialogue. So if suppose we are not coming up with our ideas, we are not saying anything, then also that also may be a part of the dialogic process. So dialogue does not just mean that we come up with our ideas only. We keep saying things. Even if we are remaining silent and not responding to what others are saying, or not reacting to what others are doing, that may also come within the broader category of dialogue too. Okay. So this is a very important point for the practitioners, because sometimes it so happens as a result of the differing power dynamics, the implementation of the ideas of the other party happens. And in that, some of the party has to keep mum or don't say the things. So in that situation, in that environment, the idea of dialogue by Karl Bauer that comes to have its meaning. Then there is another scholar by the name Karen Armstrong, and she belongs to the religious studies school. And Karen Armstrong actually highlights the aspect of the compassionate ground, because her own life experiences is in the field of religious studies. So in the dialogic study, she highlights the aspect of the compassionate understanding of the things. Then our own Fethullah Gulen, whose organization we all are associated with. So he is a Turkish Islamic scholar, and his philosophy of dialogue actually is grounded in a profound sense of the primacy of a common humanity, and in a cluster of virtue characterizing people of the earth. So Fethullah Gulen highlights the common humanity aspect in understanding the idea of dialogue. There are others too. There are certain critics too. Jürgen Habermas is there. Then it is the idea of the importance of dialogue is criticized by others. There are certain scholars who criticize this too. But we don't have time to go delve into the details of that. Let's very quickly see the transformative experience, conflict resolution, and sustained dialogue. In that, what happens is they actually create an environment in which there is triggering of something which leads to the changes coming in our understanding. And as a result of that triggering events, what happens is that the dialogic process, or all the people who are involved in the process, they come up with their own version of the thing, and they end up accepting or even supporting even those things which initially maybe they would not have even thought of even tolerating. So an idea which a party is not even doesn't even like to tolerate, and at the end of this sustained dialogue process, that they may end up in supporting that particular thing. And they have actually highlighted the whole process, which you have gone through. I have sent that to you in the material. And the sustained dialogue process actually identifies different components of relationship. So there are 5 components of relationship. I'll take the name and you will be able to understand this. And the 5 components of relationship are number 1, identity. Number 2, interest. Number 3 is power. Number 4 is perceptions, misperceptions and stereotypes. And number 5 is pattern of interaction. So these are the 5 different components of relationship, and the mediation of the thing which happens, or the dialogue which happens, that actually takes into account all these 5 aspects and works in such a manner that the triggering is done in order to reach the conclusion in a better manner. And the creation of a dialogic space takes place. And in the creation of that dialogic space that also you would have gone through, what 3 important things are there in the creation of that dialogic space? Rather, 4 important things are there. So that dialogic space that leads to the creation of a situation in which we ultimately end up understanding the final outcome of the dialogue. So that dialogic space is what? Number 1 is listening. Can you please repeat the 5 elements? Yes, sure. That is there in your reading material too. Since you have said this, let me very quickly repeat those 5 components of relationship. Number 1 is identity. Number 2 is interest. Number 3 is power. Number 4 is perception, misperception, and stereotypes. And number 5 is pattern of interaction. This is written in your study material. I think it is in the abstract too, and page number, I think it is page number 163 too. Okay. I hope it's okay.
On 168.
Who messaged this? Can you please 5 elements of relation? Mona Lisa, were you able to see this? If not there, just go through the abstract. In the abstract also it is written there. You may be able to find it later on, if just because I'm just trying to finalize. So just listen other things. Otherwise you will miss this thing too. So creating dialogic space. In creating dialogic space, what we emphasize upon is number 1, listening. Number 2, respecting. Number 3, suspending. And number 4, voicing. So listening is clear to you. There's no need to explain it. Respecting, of course, that also is okay to you all, I think, because that doesn't need much explanation. Yes, suspending, I think I need to explain. Suspending means that it's not our idea which should prevail. We should suspend our ideas. The notion which we proceed with, the idea which we proceed with, the concept which we move ahead with, we need to suspend that. Every party need to keep account of the others' ideas too. That is suspending. So until we will be able to suspend, we will not be in a position to create a true dialogic space. And the 5th one is voicing, saying what you want to say, saying what your understanding or your expectation is. So this is the 4 important sustained dialogue, creating dialogic space. And then the 5 elements of relationship also is clear to you, I think. And then just the last aspect of the, I can see, maybe Pragya otherwise will ask me to stop just 1 more minute. The last thing, which 5 stages of sustained dialogue. So these things are written in detail. Just let me very quickly read this. What are the 5 stages of sustained dialogue? And the result of this sustained dialogue has been evidently witnessed at both the international level, the community level, at the personal level. This is written in this is actually evidence in the writing which I said you. Okay. So the 5 stages of sustained dialogue is, so maybe you will say that we are talking so much about sustained dialogue, so what good use it is. It is of no good use. We are just understanding the theory. So it's not just the theory. It has been actually practically implemented too with positive results. And those 3 results are seen at the international level, at the community level and at the individual level. International level in terms of the relationship between the civil war which happened in one of the Central Asian countries, and at the national level in terms of the problems which happen in colleges in the United States of America, and at the personal level too, in terms of some people who were actually part of the substance abuse mechanism and how they overcome that substance abuse. Okay. So with this, quickly going through the 5 stages, I will stop and then open it for discussion. So the 5 stages of sustained dialogue are: number 1, decision to engage. Of course, unless and until there is a decision to engage, nothing worthwhile will come out. So number 1 is decision to engage. Number 2 is mapping relationship and naming problems. Number 3 is problems and relationship to set a direction. Number 4 is scenario building. And number 5 is acting and learning together. So with this process of 5 stages of sustained dialogue, this has been practically used and utilized and implemented with positive results. So with this, I stop here. And with sorry to Pragya that I took more time than I'm ideally given. So, but I hope I met the point which I wanted to. So I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Dr. Raza. Please raise your hands and for questions or comments if you might have. Maybe Dr. Raza, you can start asking questions to students to see if they have actually understood.
Pragya, I think it may have only 2. I can understand this in 2 ways only. Either I have been able to discuss things very brilliantly, very nicely, or otherwise in the second sense, which actually is not the case. So the second one is okay, that I have not been able to explain any of the things to any of one of you. Is it so? Have I been able to explain the things, or I just created problem with your earlier understanding of dialogue and confused you?
Mona Lisa has a comment. Mona Lisa, you can unmute yourself and just speak as well.
Yes, I can see Mona Lisa has written something. Yes,
yeah,
here all along. Yeah, I am. Yeah, if you can speak, that will be better, Mona Lisa. Yeah. So that will be in the true dialogic spirit. Otherwise, it will be in a monologic spirit, and that will not serve the purpose.
Thank you, sir. It's quite interesting. I just went through half of the excerpt, so I missed the other half. But it's been a very exciting understanding of what so many people have come together in understanding and giving us definitions of dialogue. What my question was, being from the defense forces, I've seen a lot of negotiations happening. And then, the negotiations, like very nicely put by you, is basically making a concrete contract. That is something that is what is the aim of negotiation. How do we change from the mode of negotiation to a mode of dialogue? So what should we do to make this change? Because it's going to be quite tricky, because wherever I see, like the Ukraine and Russia, they don't want to do dialogue. It's all about the power, like you mentioned, the power, the interest, the misperception, all the things that you mentioned. So how do we transcend and transverse from negotiation mode to dialogue mode?
Thank you, Mona Lisa. So should we take 2-3 questions or respond to Mona Lisa?
If there are more questions, then people can ask. And if not, you can just respond to Mona Lisa.
Okay. So thank you, Mona Lisa. And I'm happy to learn that you're from defense background, because I teach strategic and security studies. So we have started this new course in my university. I am basically from international relations background, but I teach strategic and security studies to my student, and we have recently opened it. So maybe we'll have your input in our class too. Yes, this is this is the $1 million question. This is what actually is the thing which is troubling the minds of everyone. So if you want me to answer this in one sentence, what I will say is, we need to change the approach of understanding things from the perspective of power monism. Because we have been yes, Mona Lisa, what I think the answer to your question will be that the moment we try to shift our gaze from understanding things from the perspective of power monism, we will be able to create a different world. Because nowadays what is happening, and that actually is the reason, is the real cause for so much of problems and chaos happening in the world. And that is the seeing of things from the perspective of power monism. We have different approaches to study international relations. There is this constructivist approach. There is this feminist approach to understand international relations too. So maybe we will say that because of the fact that the understanding of the world hitherto till now has been done from the realist perspective, therefore, we have not been able to put a concrete solution to many of the persisting problems. So if we try to analyze things from the perspective of the constructive element of power, or we try to understand things in terms of power as has been espoused by, for example, persons like Mahatma Gandhi. So the idea of the creative utilization of power, or the utilization of power in terms as has been proposed by, or as has been subscribed by, or as has been purported by the likes of Mahatma Gandhi. So if we try to bring change in the psyche of the people, the way we tend to think of things, the way we tend to understand things, the way the construction of the whole notion of sovereignty and power and country is done. So if we try to reanalyze things from the perspective of the creative and the progressive use of power, and not the use of power in terms of the hegemonistic or coercive use, only then we will be able to create a situation in which, because of late we have seen all the distractions as a result of seeing the world from the power monist perspective. See what happens. Even if we secure ourselves, you are from defense background, you will know it better than many of us, that United States of America, the most powerful country of the world, and we discuss all the time in security too. But then what happened? A group of people, a motley group of people, 4 or 5 people, they were able to create havoc. How and why? 9/11 happened. So America couldn't secure itself by the paraphernalia of hard power, or trying to understand or think of things in terms of hard power. Again, America went on a warring spree. America started war on terror. But as a result of the war on terror, what happened? We saw the destruction of many of the countries. But was there any listening in terms of the terrorist attack or other things? I think no. No, at least in the substantial terms. Maybe in order to prove our point, we will give some statistics. But in real terms, there was no improvement in the way the defense of the world was there before 2001. What happened? America went on a warring spree. Afghanistan was destroyed. Taliban was there. There was the destruction of the Taliban. Then again, after 20 years, what happened? They again came back to power and America receded from the place. So what we need to do is we need to think of things and reconfigure in our imagination the idea of state, nation, power, and our understanding. So only if we are able to reconfigure, this can happen from the very beginning. If we try to, this I always discuss with my students, this can happen if we try to ingrain these things, the idea of peace, the idea of positivity, the idea of not winning things. In school, generally, what do we have? We have debate, we have discussion, but we don't have a dialogic form of the competition. We might create an environment in which, rather than holding debate in school, rather than holding discussion in school, we may hold a dialogic conversation. So that will ingrain in the mind of the smaller children, and when they will grow old, when they will become defense minister or the prime minister, then they will explain things not from the power monistic perspective, but from the perspective of peace, but from the perspective of understanding, but from the perspective of mutual respect. Okay, so there needs to come the changes from within, and this we can do because we are in academia. So by inculcating this idea of utilizing the positive aspect of power, we may be able to see the changes in the long run. And there are various efforts which is happening. The way the feminist understanding of foreign policy is taking place nowadays, which earlier was a big no. The way the other aspects are getting involved, the way we are talking about gender budgeting, the way we are talking about inclusivity, the way we are talking about taking care of the needs of the marginalized and those people whose voices couldn't be heard. So in United Nations too, at other places too, this has now become reality. So we are moving towards that, but there needs to be a concerted effort. I hope I'm able to, if not fully, partially answer you, Mona Lisa.
Yes, sir. That's one of the beginnings, which I agree that the mindset and the culture needs a huge shift.
From the understanding of things in power monistic term to
yes.
The understanding of things in terms of cooperative understanding in a spirit of mutual development, mutual well-being, development of all, inclusivity, well-being. So because well-being of one is the well-being of all.
Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. This is what.
Of course. Yeah, that is the thing.
So that is
we cannot develop ourselves on our own. Only we cannot develop at the cost of others. Rather, there should be shared development. So whole of South Asia should develop, not just India, not just China, not just Pakistan, but whole of South Asia. And not just the whole of South Asia only, but the whole of the world.
Yeah, true. Thank you, sir. I would love to actually discuss this further, maybe sometime. Thank you.
Now we are at the discretion of the coordinator, Dr. Mr. Pragyan. So if she allows.
We would be happy to, of course, if there are any other questions, we can. Otherwise, we can still continue. We can have more questions from Mona Lisa as well. Alternately, if you could share your email address, maybe she could write to you as well.
Yeah, sure. I will share with you my email address, but rather I'm writing it here in the chat box. So I'll be happy to, because we have initiated this program of Masters in International Politics. And Mona Lisa, actually, my master's program, which we are offering in my department, that is MA International Politics with a specialization to Strategic Security and Peace Studies. So this is what we are actually trying to attempt. So approaching strategy and security from the perspective of peace. So we are strategizing for a secure world with the purpose of establishing peace. So that is what we are doing. So you may go see our website and our vision document. Herewith, I'm sharing my email ID, and I would love to discuss things further with. It is gmail.com. It's tahseen979@gmail.com.
Thank you, Dr. Raza. Other people, if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hands. Meanwhile, Mona Lisa, you can share your questions and your further more questions, we can take them together. Dr. Raza can take your.
No, actually, I would love to share a very interesting incident, because one of my friends here, I don't remember who was saying about authoritarian, and there is a lot of problems in Kashmir. So the negotiation turning into a dialogue happened when, when we were posted there, it was near the LOC, and his father came in and he was arrayed, and he came in and actually fell in front of an officer, touching his feet and begging him to kill his son, because they had abducted and they were trying to use him in a different way. So I just want everybody to be cautioned that this is a very gruesome experience, but how it turns into a good one, I won't say a good one, but somehow beneficial to the family. So when the officer interrogated as to what happened and why are you actually wanting us to kill your son, he said, the government here is going to look after our family and protect us, and my other kids are not going to be taken away, kind of. And the kind of authoritarian presence of people there in the LOC is very, very difficult to crack. So when we are there, when we are trying to tell people, then the actual ground reality is that dialogue never happens. It's always a deal, which is a negotiation, unfortunately, because so much of trouble is there, so much of systemized terror has been spread, like you were just mentioning, sir, about how a couple of people only traumatized and changed the whole agenda for US after the 9/11. So this has been happening, and it's even if you try to get into it and try to get a dialogue so that it doesn't happen, even though the people know that, okay, this is the best way to do things, they're not able to. The enabling of people by changing mindset is something which is very restrictive, which I have seen with my experience. So that's why I asked the question, because it's very difficult to tell somebody who's under terror that, okay, let's come up to the table and try to have a beneficial discussion and then come up with ways in which you can be benefited. So that was what is quite troubling, because if you see such a scene, which is really, I get sometimes I get those dreams and I wake up in the middle of the night, because when you see such things happening in front of your eyes, it is very, very troublesome. So this is one of the things, and I'm really happy that you are actually getting into the securities and you're taking into getting peace as a very big agenda into the course. It is very, very important to understand that peace is not a compromise. Peace is an essential human right, and we all need to be there in the existence.
Nalisa, actually, the thing is, there must be beginning from somewhere. At least, because hitherto till now, what has happened? We have not been able to capitalize on the developmental aspect, which we otherwise would have achieved a lot. So what we need to do is, there must have been problems somewhere. So we need to restart our thinking in such a manner that perhaps maybe 10 years or 15 years or 20 years from now on, what will be the situation? So maybe right now we are under the garb of such a situation, which is very troubling. But we should not allow we should not allow ourselves to be trapped in this too. Yes, we are right. We do understand, because when we have to face the bearers best knows where the shoes pin. So when we are actually into the situation, but at the same time, we must try to do things so that the problems which are happening, that may find some sort of solution. So the beginning needs to be done.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise, all our efforts will go in vain. All the things which we are doing, that will not accrue any desired result. So that is that is being in academia. That is what we need to do, because we know that there are a lot many things, and in this particular thing, I am reminded of a very important exhortation by Antonio Gramsci. And good that you reminded me of this. Gramsci says that optimism of the will and pessimism of the intellect. So there is pessimism of the intellect, because we will analyze the thing, we will get in a pessimistic mode. But that pessimism of the intellect should be supported with the optimism of the will. So always many students, even last classes, one of my students was saying, sir, we are facing so much of problem, and you are all the time so much optimistic. So it's not that I'm very optimistic, but the thing is, we need to buttress our pessimism of the will with pessimism of the intellect, with the optimism of the will to bring changes in the society. Otherwise, if we will mar ourselves, there are a lot of troubling things. So if we will get ourselves trapped into that troubledness of pessimism, then we will never be able to move ahead. So, and I always say this to my students that, see, imagine yourself in a situation 200, 300 years back, and imagine a king. Imagine a king who is giving power to another king on the basis of writing something on a piece of paper. Because what is now happening as a democratic process, we are actually having peaceful transition of power. If we go to time machine and we go back to, for example, the age of Mughals or others before that, if we say this, everybody will say that this could never be a possibility. But there is the existence of possibility because now we are transitioning in a democratic manner in many countries of the world. And where this is not happening, we call those countries to be not good countries. Okay. So with this optimism, we need to work. Of course, there are
true
pessimistic things, but we need to go back to Antonio Gramsci and take the cudgel from his exhortation that we need to move ahead with the optimism of the will and not get trapped in the pessimism of the intellect.
No, I agree with you, sir. This was like way back around 25 years ago. So there's been a lot of change which has happened, but it's a little slow. But yes, optimism and hopefulness is something which we have to go ahead with. So that's one of the reasons that I am doing what I do right now. I'm emotional intelligence and I work with women and children because they are the ones who actually can...
with your experience, you can really do a lot many things. You have got a rich experience. So
thankfully.
And this is how we can play our part. We can play our part in whatever way possible for building a more inclusive, peaceful, and better world. So this is what we can. There is a couplet in Urdu. We aspire for a lot many things. We want to do a lot many things, but finally, what we end up doing doesn't depend on our hand. So perhaps it's Ghalib has said this. ये आरज़ू भी बड़ी चीज है मगर हमदम वैसाले यार फकत आरज़ू की बात नहीं. Meaning by whatever we want to achieve, whatever we want to do, we may just play our part in doing that thing. वैसाले यार फकत आरज़ू की, but it is not just wishing and doing which will finally lead to your result. Maybe we will not be able to reach the result. We will not be able to achieve the final end. But then at least we have the satisfaction that we played our part. So that satisfaction, nobody should take away from us.
Correct. Very well said.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Dr. Raza. This is with this note, with this beautiful Urdu shairi, I would like, since we are out of time, I would like to end the session. And thank you for this, for taking out time and this wonderful session, which covered a lot of things, which I'm sure our participants really enjoyed. Just an admin announcement. I have sent the reflection forms. I will be sending it on the WhatsApp again. And the deadline is Saturday, 6 p.m., 12th of November. And I look forward to seeing all your learnings in the reflection form. Thank you again, Dr. Raza, for taking out the time.
Thank you, the participants. Thanks to everyone. Thanks to you and Behzad and In Dialogue. All the best. Thank you.